Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Spartan Forge. On today's episode, I am joined by Jon Gabrio, owner of Apex Advertising and co-owner of the Elk Collective. Jon is a successful elk and mule deer hunter, but unlike most Western hunters, he loves chasing mountain whitetails. We talk about what it's like chasing mountain bucks in the northwestern U.S., scouting, playing the long game, non-resident whitetail hunting in Washington, bad weather equaling big bucks, and much more. The Spartan Forge app utilizes years of military background and machine learning to pull from millions of data points to accurately predict deer movement, including GPS data, 30 years of weather, academic, and state research. The new app includes GPS mapping with incredible aerial imagery, offline dependability, deer prediction, weather updates, journal entries, and much more. Be sure to continue to update the app because every week there is new features that are being added, including the new measurement tool and a bunch of things to come here in the future. So if you want to check out that, you can use the code EastMeetsWest to save 20% off of the Spartan Forge app at spartanforge.ai. You can also, if you're not sure and you're on the fence about it, head over to spartanforge.ai and sign up for the 14-day free trial and use that code EastMeetsWest, and then it'll apply the discount if you decide to keep it going forward. So check that out. Tethered is a company founded on the principles of educating the hunting community on saddle hunting while creating the most innovative, lightweight, safe products for saddle hunting. They have mobile hunting gear options for all types of hunters and continue to push the envelope. The new Skeletor climbing sticks come in at just about 2 pounds a piece and are budget friendly compared to their one sticks. They're not as lightweight, but they're a little bit easier on the pocketbook. So to learn more about tethered and saddle hunting, head over to tetherednation.com. Maven is building the highest quality optics at half the price of their competitors through their direct-to-consumer business model. They want to create the best optics for the job, period. The products are backed with a lifetime no-fault warranty and an incredible customer experience. You can now save money on bundling options of spotting scopes, rifle scopes, and more on their website. Whether you're looking for an ultralight setup or an optics powerhouse, Maven has you covered. You can use the coupon code EastMeetsWest-gift for a free gift with any full price optics order at mavenbuilt.com. Go Wild is a free social community built by hunters for hunters. Join me on Go Wild today to get $10 to spend on gear for just setting up your account. You'll keep unlocking Go Wild rewards, and you can now see my complete gear setups over underneath my profile, which is just under my name, Beau Martonik. Join at timetogowild.com or in the App Store. You can use the code EastMeetsWest to save 10% off of all hunting gear on the website, including tethered saddle hunting products. So check that out. This week's Mountain Buck Monday story of the week comes from the one and only Johnny Stewart. So Johnny had said, at 4:30 a.m. before the first day of the gun season in Pennsylvania, I studied the Spartan Forge app and found an area that was vast and would allow me to find some buck tracks to follow since we had 4 inches of snow. Just before daylight, I spotted buck tracks crossing the road. I followed the deer but bumped him. He then bedded on a mountain point with 2 other bucks, which I spooked while tracking him. I decided to back out and go eat lunch. After lunch, I headed back to their track. The 3 bucks were on the move, and I saw a small opening where the bucks were headed. I shouldered my gun and fired a shot when the next buck stepped into view. The rest is history. This is a typical Johnny Stewart track job. He always seems to get it done in the late season, getting after it. I'm going to have to get the full story of this from Johnny, as well, I did in person, but I'd always love to get Johnny back on the podcast. So if you want to check out that buck and some of the photos and stuff of it, head over to East Meets West Hunt on Instagram or East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook, and you can check all of that out over there. In other news, we have some new apparel over on the East Meets West website. You got the Spike Dad Hat and the Deer Camp Roper, which are both made by Legacy here in Pennsylvania. If you ever have been familiar with Legacy hats, their old favorite is it is a favorite from everybody for how comfortable it is, but they have a bunch of different styles. So these are some of the new ones that I got. Super comfortable. And the Deer Camp Roper is in the burnt orange color is my favorite new hat that I've come out with in a while there. So you can go check those out. And any orders off of the website, any apparel orders, any products, 3% is donated to a conservation organization of the quarter. And for this quarter until the end of 2021 here, 3% goes to the National Deer Association. So I try to choose organizations that I really like and support and be able to give back there. So go check that out, eastmeetswesthunt.com/shop if you want to go support the podcast and some of these organizations, as well as rocking some sweet lifestyle apparel. All right, so now we're getting to the end of, we are at the end of 2021 and looking forward on 2022 here. So I hope everyone's kind of, rewind and looking back at their year, things they can improve on, whether that's hunting, life, or whatever else, more important stuff than hunting, but looking at it and seeing what you can improve on. And going forward, I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, so to speak, but it does give you a good kind of reset at the beginning of the year and just looking forward. So there's the Western hunting, and I'm going to be doing some more stuff of that here when it comes around finding opportunities and everything else, because it is getting harder to find over-the-counter opportunities and other things out there. So I'm going to try to put together some more information here, working on something for Free Range American right now as far as draw deadlines and everything else, and putting together a plan. Going to get some of the guys from Eastman's back on the podcast to help talk about building out a plan and how to do that, as far as, because it is confusing. So trying to set yourself up to have opportunities this year and also in the future. So those are some of the things, first and foremost, that looking to share coming out in 2022. But a couple of big things that I had mentioned, I guess, earlier in 2021 that I'm going to pull the trigger on and go forward with. I've had both of these ideas for quite a while, and I've just been kind of overthinking them and really haven't had much of the time to put them together. But I'm going to dedicate the time to do that and get it rolling. So the one is an in-person mountain bucks camp. So I don't know exactly what the name of it's going to be, but essentially where have people come in for a couple days and go through, listen to myself and others, talking in a classroom setting about some different scouting type things and getting your hands on some of the gear, having some of these companies come in and getting to try out some saddles, getting to learn how to e-scout and do all these different things in person. But the most important part is being able to get out in the field and seeing how we look at it and how we're scouting and how we're putting together a plan. So I'm looking at doing that probably sometime in April, before green up really comes, but given some time to put this whole thing together. So be on the lookout for that, as well as an online course that I'm working on for scouting. So I've done a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of free content out there, which I'll continue to do. But this would be a more encompassing for someone that really wants to learn from the very beginning to the end, creating the framework, looking at scouting, understanding all of those different components to scouting and to big woods whitetails, and putting that together all in one place. And that's something that I'm looking looking to do going forward here. So as far as when that'll be released, it'll probably sometime mid 2022. So it's going to be a lot of work to put together, but building that out. And if anybody has anything specific that they think would be cool to cover or really interested in learning, definitely shoot me an email over at beau@eastmeetswesthunt.com, and I'll be able to check that out. So, well, I hope that you've been having some good time with your families over the holidays here and had a Merry Christmas. And now it's kind of time to focus on getting into the new year and the winter months. So thanks, everyone, for listening. As always, I really, really appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week.
Cool.
All right, we're live. Jon Gabrio, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to have a Western whitetail hunter. You don't hear of too many of them being able to come on.
Yeah, it's kind of rare. I get a lot of heat from all the guys out here in the West. Everybody, you need to be hunting mule deer, and at least I got the elk thing going. But as soon as late season comes, I'm off chasing whitetails, and everyone thinks I'm nuts because I'm not out chasing big mule deer around the mountains. But it's all right. You kind of get used to it, take the heat, deal with it, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
So
what's your background as far as how did you kind of get into whitetails and where you grew up and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Western Washington. I was about 45 minutes south of Seattle, off towards Mount Rainier. And I was born and raised there and just kind of spent my whole life in Washington pretty much. About 2 years ago, I actually moved to Utah with the other half, 2.5 years ago. And then this year we actually moved to Montana. So kind of been all over the last 3 years here, but now we finally settled. But anyways, the whitetail thing kind of came out of nowhere in Washington. It was about 2004 or 5. I was like a sophomore or junior in high school, and my dad, he just kind of came over one year and he's like, hey, let me back up. He worked at an archery shop.
Okay.
My dad, he was retired and just wanted something to do, went and worked at the local archery shop. And there was a guy in there that we knew just from around the area, older gentleman, kind of same age as my dad. And he's 74 now. And so anyways, he was like, hey, I'm going whitetail hunting in Eastern Washington. Do you want to go? And my dad was like, well, I've never done it, I guess. So let's go give it a shot. Well, this guy had been over there and done it for, handful of years, probably 6-7 years at that point. And took my dad along and kind of just threw him at the crash course of like, hey, focus on this area and just go figure it out, type of thing. And my dad took it and went with it. And so got some tree stands, trail cameras, everything, and just decided to go and give it a shot. So my dad pretty much froze to death in the stand the first year because he didn't have enough clothes. And, and so he said he'd sit from like daylight until like 8 a.m. and was already, freezing. And so he'd go get in the truck and warm up and come back and sit in the stand, and learned real fast that he just didn't have enough clothes going on the first couple of years.
Yeah.
And so it took him a few to kind of dial in his outfit, but he'd seen just total random. Like the guy kind of told my dad a few things to look for, some scrapes and, rub lines and stuff, and just certain things to keep an eye out for. So my dad just took off hiking and found some of these spots and, hey, this looks good, and a big scrape, and I'm going to hang a tree stand right there and let's call it a day. Well, he had this giant buck walk out, and it just big 4 on each side, big split eye guards. And my dad said still to this day, it's probably one of the biggest bucks that we've seen in all of our years over there. And, never even got a shot off at it because it hurt him draw and spooked and ran. And so after that, I think my dad was kind of hooked because, he's hunted blacktails his entire life in Western Washington. So it was kind of a new thing. And man, seeing a big buck like that, like snow on the ground, let's try it. So then the next year he's like, hey, do you want to go with me and give this a shot? I'm like, well, let's try it. Well, like, why not? Something different. So he kind of had the rough times out of the way, at least with clothing. So he kind of got me dialed in pretty quick, with a bunch of clothes. And we went over and started just scouring the woods and the hillsides and just trying to find and figure out spots. And By that point, man, I don't know. It was like almost like you were hooked before you even knew that you were hooked, if that makes sense. It was kind of I haven't even killed one yet. I haven't even sat in the tree stand. I haven't even done anything. And it was like, man, this is just fun. Like trying to figure out what we're doing, where's this tree stand going to go? And we set some tree stands, and it was literally like probably my first evening or second day in the stand. I can't remember. It's been 17 years ago, but anyways, I was sitting in the stand, and I had this just giant buck come just cruising down through the timber, like coming towards me. And it came into about 80 yards maybe, and then just turned and like walked off. And I literally remember seeing that deer, and like my heart was going so bad that I was like, one, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to shoot this buck. Yeah. And then, if it comes in closer, and two, it was just seeing a deer like that on the hoof was kind of, I grew up hunting blacktails too. And I never seen anything like that. And so anyways, I watch it walk off. And of course, after that, I'm like, man, all I wanted was just to see that buck again and kill it. And of course, never did. And hunted like the whole week, and end up on the last day. My dad's like, just shoot a doe just to get some experience. Like just shoot a doe, get one under your belt with your bow and over here, because he was telling me he missed a couple bucks prior because they would duck when he would shoot. And so I was like, whatever, this doe comes out last evening. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to shoot this thing and just like get one. Well, I shot that doe. Dude, you would think I killed the biggest buck of my life. I was so excited that I just got this whitetail doe, Yeah. and so it was the weirdest thing, because I'd already killed some elk. I'd killed a couple bears. I've killed blacktails, but I'd never killed this whitetail. And so it's like the first one with a bow, and I was jacked. So then I'm like, okay, next year, like, come on, bring it on. So then I don't know. It just literally, like, as funny as it sounds, like that doe kind of hooked me, but it was more the experience, setting the trail cameras, setting everything, doing all the legwork weeks before in advance, months leading up to that. So it was like when the next year came around, then we kind of really went after it and put more time, more effort, more trail cameras, more stands, and really just kind of ran through, I guess what I look back now is like the easy times, because now everything seems like it's like twice as much work as what it was then. Yeah. But I think it was almost like a good thing then, because it taught me, hey, like you're going to have to put in a lot of work at this if you want to kill big deer. And so then I was just on this like path of figuring out, how am I going to kill one of these big bucks? Well, in the meantime, so that next year, this is when I think also when I kind of got dug a little deeper into the hook, my dad's buddy had been chasing this buck. He shot this buck the year before. So when I shot that doe, he shot this buck and hit it high above the backbone, like just no man's land, barely hit it. And it was a giant. And he never showed us pictures, just told us it was big. But he had it on trail camera. And the next year, he ends up killing this deer. And he hunts it literally for like 3 weeks and ends up killing this thing in December. And there's like 20 inches of snow on the ground and just super cold, like negative temperatures, kills this buck, and it ends up being like 226.
Oh,
yeah.
My.
Yeah. Like public land, Washington whitetail, like 226. And so, of course, after that, I was like, I need to kill one of those deer, Yeah. And I'm like over here, like proud with my doe, just, whatever. But anyways, that year before. So that year though, we hunted so hard, and I ended up shooting that year. Before he killed that buck, I shot just a little basket rack 3-point buck, just a little, well, actually, I guess you guys would call it like a little 6-pointer. Yeah. And, but anyways, yeah. So I was like ecstatic because I killed one with horns, but then I see this buck that he killed, and I'm just like, man, I need one of those, And so,
this will look good in the house.
yeah, exactly. Like this is going to look awesome, And so long story short, after that, then the next year, of course, knowing that there was bucks like that over there. Oh, so my dad that year had shot a big deer. I don't know how, he still doesn't know how big, but 170s, 80s type buck, and ended up losing it. And then he shot a cougar too over there out of the stand. So there was a lot going on that kind of caught my interest really quick of, hey, I could shoot a cat. There's bears around, we got big bucks running all over. Then the wolf thing kind of came into play the next year. And at that time, Fish and Wildlife in Washington was like, there's no wolves. And we had them on trail camera, and my dad had one walk out. So there was just so much that kind of came into play that I kind of got hooked on just seeing all the animals. And so that's kind of, I think, where it started. But then the next year, my third year, really put in the time, more time yet than we had before, started getting bigger deer on camera. And then that was when everything kind of started clicking. So it was kind of like a 3-year major learning curve, and trying to learn from this guy who killed that big buck. Like I literally pick his brain. There's a couple other guys started picking their brains, and I just wanted to be successful. It was like, I just want to punch my tag. I don't care if I'm killing a big deer. I just want to kill a buck every year.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of how it started. Like that was my goal. Like, let me just kill a buck every single year, and then we'll figure it out from there. And hopefully I start killing bigger ones. So I've only had 2 years in all my years that I have not killed a buck ever since then. And one of them, we got snowed out, and it got about, man, I can't remember, that storm dumped. It was like 20 or 22 inches of snow. And we just couldn't physically even get into where we hunt. There were trees down everywhere. Didn't want to risk it. And then it iced over, and my dad was like, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
So, that year, and then last year, 2020 was the only other year I haven't killed a buck.
Were you holding out?
Yeah. Well, I was hunting one specific deer, and I had him the first night, and I should have killed him. And I made a rookie mistake that I thought I'd learned over all these years, and blew it. And then he came in the next night.
What'd you do?
So, dude, it wasn't actually like as much as like a rookie mistake as blowing it. I mean, yes, it was. But so, do you hunt out of ground blinds at all?
A little bit, not very much.
Okay. So about 5-6 years ago, my sister decides that she wants to start hunting with us. So my dad, hey, we're going to do ground blinds. I don't want her sitting in a tree and yada, yada. Well, I was like totally against the ground blind thing. Didn't want to do it. Nope. And seeing her kill a few bucks out of it. And then 2017, actually, or 2018, one of the years, I killed a big buck sitting in there, but it started raining one day and the snow started melting. And my dad talked me into going and sitting in the ground blind for the very first time. And of course, hour and a half after sitting there, this big buck walks out that we had on camera and ended up killing it. So, and he never let me live it down. So my mistake was, we figured out with the ground blinds is that you pretty much got to put those things in like a couple weeks before you sit in them. If you just go throw one up, those deer get super spooky. And, especially if you have them kind of patterned or coming by at a certain place or whatever, and you just go throw a ground blind in there and you don't brush it in good enough or whatever, they're going to know something
sticks out like a sore thumb.
Exactly. And they're going to change their habits. Well, that day we went and checked one of the cameras. We'd done about 3 weeks prior setup, coming back every weekend, checking everything, changing things, moving stuff, checking scrapes, everything. And we came back, and this big buck was on the camera and literally there like every single day and just passing through. And I'm like, I'm killing that deer. And so I'd never seen him before. And it was just kind of like one of those, he's too big not to hunt. And he'd been there in the daylight on my camera a couple of days prior, and there was a big snowstorm. And I'm like, perfect. What we're going to do, Kylie and I, we're going to drive up. We had a blind at another spot, and she was hunting with me. So this is part of where the ground blind came into play. Is this other stand happened to be kind of dead. I said, let's go up in the morning. It's going to snow hard all day. Let's get that ground blind out, take it down to the other spot, throw it in, and just let it dump. And then hopefully the snow will cover it up and we'll be good. So we go down, we throw this ground blind in, and it's snowing, and there's already like probably 6 inches of snow on the ground from nothing that morning. And it just is still dumping. We climb, and as we're setting the blind up, I was like, let's get out of here today and go sit another blind, and we'll come back tomorrow. Well, as we're doing that, all of a sudden a doe and a fawn come walking by, and I'm like, there's deer in the area. They're moving. It's snowing. The big buck was here yesterday in the daylight. Hadn't been there this morning because I checked the camera. Maybe he'll be there. Let's sit. So we go grab our bows and stuff, go down and just get in the blind. And I was thinking it was snowing so hard that it would cover it up. It did. There's probably 6 inches of snow on top of the blind. And I'm like, perfect. Deer's not even going to know it's there. And we'd put it in these like thick trees and stuff. So about 4 o'clock, here's a couple does coming by. And all of a sudden I hear footsteps coming behind us down the hill. And I'm kind of, maybe it's a doe. I don't know, but we'll find out. So I grab my bow. Kylie's sitting here. She's like, I'll film whatever, first day. She grabs a camera. All of a sudden, 10 yards out of the corner of the blind, that buck's head just like pops out, and he stops and looks right in the freaking window. And I was just like, this is not good. Like this is not a good situation. He's either going to spook. I don't even have my bow back. I don't know. And the doe and the fawn are about 20, 22 yards just standing there looking back at him. Dude, he just backs up slow, turns, walks around this tree and comes down in it like 50 yards up to the doe and the fawn. I should have drawn my bow. Didn't even draw my bow because I was like, holy crap, that's a big buck in person. And I was, I'm looking at him in person and it just caught me off guard. And I was spooked because when he came down and looked in the window, I don't know, dude, it just rattled me. Yeah. And so, dude, he walks by at like 22 yards and then stops and I'm not even ready. And then just walks off. And that was it. And I just sat there thinking to myself, you've killed enough big bucks. How did this just happen? And so I don't know. I just like kind of lost it. So then we snuck out of there. Next day came back and I'm like, we're sitting here every day till I kill that deer. Like I had to. Like after you seeing a deer like that, I was like, I got to kill it. Dude, next afternoon, same time, comes in. But he comes in to my right now instead of the left and comes in and picks up a doe out. There's like some old like logging kind of clear cut stuff with a bunch of grown up trees. And he picks up this doe and they come flying in past the blind. I'm at full draw because I hear him coming. Try to stop him. I'm like, rap, doing everything. Nothing. And he runs off, comes back flying by the blind. And just, dude, I could not get a shot off at this stupid deer. And so then sat the third day and we're sitting 10 hours a day. Nothing. And then fourth day, here he comes again in the evening. I hear him but he's like out in the trees and I can hear him grunt and just running around and kind of, I don't know. I was like, maybe he'll come by tonight, not feeling super good about it, but maybe. Well, he ran off. It got dark and I was like, let's get out and walk to the truck, get out of here. He's gone. Dude, we're walking down the road, climb out of the timber. Well, we have to walk away to get out of the timber and then we walk this old gated road out to the truck and we're heading out. All of a sudden you hear these deer come crashing down through the timber towards us. And I'm like, stop, turn your headlamp off, as fast as we could. And 2 does go flying like airborne across the road in front of us. And I hear this buck grunt and just running down through the timber and slams on the brakes, like next to us at like 15, 20 yards and just stops. But I can't see because it's like pitch black. And I'm just like, great. Was that buck? Was it him? Was it a different buck? Cause there was like 2-3 other bucks in the area. So I wasn't sure which one it was, but I know he was running the area. So then he runs off. Everything got quiet. We left. Well, I was so hung up on killing that deer. And after seeing him and especially having those encounters that I wanted to kill him. This is where my mistake came in because I'm the type of guy, I'll usually check my camera every single day. And so I stopped checking the camera thinking, oh, well, there's a couple other big ones here. Kylie will shoot one of them. One of them is going to come in, make a mistake, but maybe my buck will come back. Hunted 6 more days, 60 hours and seen one other buck. And that buck was gone, never on my camera. Like it was him that night. And we must've spooked him when we were walking out and never seen him. So my mistake was putting the ground blind in, thinking that he wasn't going to notice it, especially with all the snow. Dude, he walked right down, looked out the tree, around that tree and looked right in at the black hole. Boom. It was over. Never took the same pattern the next few days. When he'd show up on the camera, he showed up from a different direction. So I know the blind spooked him from where he was coming from. and then walking out that night, which you can't control that situation with those does and like him chasing them.
Yeah.
We got unlucky. But fast forward to this year, that's the buck that I killed this year.
Was it? No way.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool because I hunted him for over 100 hours last year. Thought I was, even though he was gone for 60 of those, but I thought it was him, or he was still there, but he wasn't. And then this year, that was the buck that I tracked down again and then hunted him for 3 days and ended up killing him. So I basically spent 13 days on the same deer in the stand.
So why do you think he was coming into that same area day after day like that?
So the deer that I hunt, they're in the mountains, but they kind of live in a certain little like draw. When the rut starts, they kind of literally will hang out in, it's tough to say. I would say like maybe a 500-yard circle. Like they will not leave it until they get either on lockdown or the does that are there they've bred them. And then I'll have bucks wander in from 3 miles away. It's like, you don't know, but I think they get in a little core area. There's like major travel. They got thick cover. Then there's travel corridors that come down through this timber. It's kind of a ridge that runs down from like above, and it creates a pinch point, and it's kind of a flat bench at the bottom of this ridge.
Okay.
And I think they come down there in the night to get the does, and they breed, and they all kind of run around. They feed on that bench because there's feed. Then they're rutting around on that bench, and then they can go back up and go bed in these thick draws, and they're away from everybody. But it's kind of like their travel corridor and a pinch point, I guess. They're coming down out of there, and they're hitting these fingers on these ridges, and they all kind of come together. So it's like they're going to come down searching for does, checking. There's a couple big scrapes that I've dominant scrapes that I've found in these areas, in my areas over the years. So I try to set up next to those. And so that's kind of my major strategy, I guess, is trying to find those scrapes, set up near them, all the deer in the area. And I've watched on my cameras. I mean, I will have deer come and hit those things like all year, without anything. So once I find those spots and I set a camera on them, I kind of know that, hey, these deer hit this all year. I know that that's a good spot. And then after that, and then the other thing we can do is we can bait. So, but I'll say like we have some spots that we do bait, but the big bucks do not come to like the bait necessarily. Yeah. I mean, it's like they avoid it at all costs. And so
it helps keep the does in the area.
It'll help keep some of the does around, but the big bucks literally won't touch it. And so I actually have cameras that I'll set up 20, 30 yards back away from the bait as like surveillance cameras and in certain places. And I'll have big bucks come in and literally show up on that camera staring at does, and they'll never come in and they'll never get picked up on the other camera. Really? Yep. And it's the weirdest thing. I had one buck this year that did that, and he literally would stand back at one of my stands that I bait at, because not all of them I do, but one of them that I do. And I had this camera set up, and I made a mock scrape like 20 yards behind it. And this buck, he's like 170-inch deer. And he would come in and just stand there and stare and look at the does, and the other camera would never pick him up. And I had over 2 weeks, I had over 5,000 pictures like of deer just at the one spot, and nothing. Like you would not know that buck even existed. He wasn't in the background. Like it was like Houdini. He would just disappear. And then all of a sudden you'd pull the other camera, and I'd look at times, and he's literally there with like in seconds of when the flash, or not the flash, but the camera would go off, on the other tree, and it would never pick him up. How do you explain? It's the weirdest thing. Yeah. Like you think you would catch him in the background, but it was just far enough that you couldn't see him.
That's interesting. And and I heard you mention logging cuts. Is there quite a few logging cuts in the area that like you hunt in western or in eastern Washington? Yeah, in certain areas there are. There's like some areas that have been logged pretty good, but when I say that, I mean they're like reprod, we call them, where they've grown back up 10, 15 years, so they're kind of getting to that point where they're really thick. Yeah. So the deer love that.
But some of the stuff I hunt actually, and some of my best spots are big old growth timber. So it's like trees that, big evergreens out here that, I don't know how old they are, 200 years old, maybe, like just giant trees, 100-foot tall tree type thing. And, some of those, maybe 150 on some big trees. And some of that big timber stuff is actually some of my better spots. And it's weird because there doesn't seem like there's as much cover, but I don't know if it's because the tree canopy, the trees are so big that it blocks light out coming down in there. So they feel safer moving around in that big timber all day. I'm kind of assuming over the years that that's what it is, because those have been my better spots.
It's funny because I have some areas that are thick and evergreens like that, but it's not thick like as in you can't walk through it. It's pretty open underneath the canopy. But one thing is, like, you lose like 25, 30 minutes of shooting light in those areas because they are so dark, but the deer travel through it. Like, I find like a lot in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of like hemlocks that'll run through the creek bottoms and just up on the side of the hills a little bit. And those areas are money for bucks traveling through and stuff, but it's not necessarily that thick. And I don't know about how high they are up for you, but like sometimes that canopy will be, I don't know, 12, 14 feet up, and I can't even go up that high, or I won't be able to see underneath it,
Yeah. And that's what happens with me. And so I have a few spots where that canopy, is only 12, 14 feet. And that's actually kind of that 170-inch buck that I had on camera this year. That's what happened in that spot. Is the canopy is so short, but it's really thick. I had to use a ground blind. And so it's kind of certain spots work good for ground blinds. Others are tree stands. Some of my other spots, when I'm talking about this big timber, dude, some of my spots, the canopy's 60 feet off the ground. It's like way up there, And so it just kind of, I think it's high enough, but there's so many limbs on these trees that it just creates this dark environment down in there.
Yeah.
And so, but the problem is it's open on some of those trees. So I hang my stands at like 25 feet trying to, get high enough off the ground to avoid them looking up in the trees and stuff. Cause you don't have a lot of cover.
Yeah. And so like where you're typically hunting at, is it pretty steep type country? Is it like actual mountain type country?
Yeah. So everything I hunt, when you think about like kind of out here in the West, it's like guys come out here and hunt elk, and you see these big giant mountains and steep hills and stuff. Where I'm hunting my whitetails are literally in stuff like that. I could have a mountain that runs up 3,000 feet right behind my tree stand, so it's definitely steep country. I do have a couple stands that is in a little more mild terrain. I'll call it mild.
Like more foothills type stuff.
Yeah. Stuff like that. But I don't ever hunt any lowland, farmland, anything. It's all in the mountains. Everything I do is, elevation wise, you're 3,500 feet plus, elevation and on up from there. So, a lot of guys that hunt whitetails over there, some people have access to private property down in the farmlands and stuff, and they'll hunt down at 2,000 feet, 1,500 feet above sea level type stuff. But some of my stands, I've had stands at 5,000 feet. So, it's like when you start doing that in November, snow hits, things get a little dicey, and that's why you get snowed out. So
that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you said you're looking for like these big scrapes, the dominant scrapes, or I don't know if you call them community scrapes but same type of thing, you said that's a pretty big focus on what you're looking for.
Yeah. So I'll actually kind of look at a map. I'll take a topo map and or Google Earth, both, but I'll try to find, if I'm looking for new spots, and I'll just try to find a mountain range with like ridge lines that are coming down off of it. And I try to look for ones, and I'll go to like Topo View or something on Onyx or whatever, where I'll get 2 or 3 ridges that I look like they're kind of coming together and create like into one ridge. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I'll just go in and go for a hike, and I'll just start scouring that main single ridge, and then where it branches out, going up these other ridges, looking for these scrapes. And that's kind of something I start looking for initially, is trying to find that, or a bench. Like if these ridges come down and hit a bench in the timber where it might be maybe 100 yards wide, but 300 yards, around, like just a flat bench. And
with like a bunch of fingers that run off of it.
Yep. And they'll come down and hit those, and you'll start finding rubs. You'll start finding trails that work down into those. And then I literally kind of grid it. I'll like make grids and start walking back and forth, trying to find scrapes, And once I find them, then, okay, yep, there's one here. And don't get me wrong, it's not like I find one in every single spot, but it's like once you do find one, then I'll really start focusing, keep an eye on it. Yep. Okay. They're hitting it. There's fresh tracks. One of the best times to scout, and I wish I did it more, I should say, is after I've killed my deer, like in November when they're actually rutting, because all that sign is fresh. It's there. It's in the snow. And I spend time then, but not as much as I would like to, because I'm usually trying to get Kylie a deer, or my dad or sister or someone else is still hunting. And then we're trying to take care of deer, or maybe I'm still hunting. They've killed one. And then it's like, okay, finally I killed one. We got to get home type of thing. Mm-hmm. So you kind of run out of time. But I have spent some time. This year was a good year because my dad hunted for another week after I killed my buck. And so it was cold. So we got my deer taken care of, and then he kept hunting. So it was a perfect time for me just to keep scouting. And I feel like I learned a lot in some of my spots this year, just spending all that time scouting that I just don't get the luxury to do other than like in the summer or spring or, other years. So
do you do much shed hunting?
Yes. Well, yes and no. I would like to say yes, but not over there. It's funny. Okay. If I spent time shed hunting, it's like elsewhere looking for elk sheds or something like that. Mm-hmm. I just don't get a ton of time to like spend time looking for whitetail sheds. When I do, it's usually in October, like a month before I start hunting over there. And I'll go around. Of course, some of them are chewed up or picked up, but I'll spend a lot of time when I'm month before scouting, I guess, looking for sheds at that point. But the deer in that area don't hang out much where they're shedding to where I'm hunting them, because the snow gets deep, so they move.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a big difference between here as far as the eastern mountain bucks or big woods deer versus where you're at, because you have all that, the elevation that brings in the snow. I remember talking to Troy Pottinger about that, and he said like most of the time it's only if they drop in like January or something where they might be living at in November. Then because if they drop later, they could be a couple thousand feet lower at that point.
Exactly. So Troy, I know Troy, and then so Troy, I mean, we don't hunt next to each other, but similar country.
Yeah.
And so that's, same thing happens with that, is those deer. I found a big shed, 2015 or 16. And he's basically just a big 4 on the one side. He's a 3 with a giant brow, and then he's got a kicker off of his G2, but that deer had so much mass on that shed. And I literally found that shed right next to one of my stands. I parked and like walked off the bank from the truck just to go down in this hole and check it out, and found it 15 feet off the road. And the buck literally shed right off the edge of the road. But I looked all over for that deer. Do you think never had him on trail camera, and I've covered that whole mountain for years. And so I don't know where he was living. And 2, it was like to shed there, he had to have shed there late December or January for that shed, because the snow that year got really deep, and there's no way that deer was living up there. So it's kind of weird when you start thinking about it and thinking where these deer shed, and like trying to find them in that country, because it's not an easy feat to go be like, oh, I'm going to go track that buck down. I found his shed. He's here.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't work like that. And once they get up in that timber and start working out on those mountains, I mean, who knows? So,
yeah. So to go back a little bit to the e-scouting portion, do you put much time into that? Or are you just looking for those terrain features? Is there anything from like a vegetation standpoint that you're looking at online, or that kind of draws you in?
Yeah. So I spend, Kylie would probably kill, if anyone else, she'd kill anyone. I mean, me, but it's like, I spend so much time scouting. I mean, I'm lucky because it's like literally every night I go to bed and we literally like watch TV, or she will, laying in bed, and I'm like on Onyx looking at maps. And I, like every night, whether it's elk or deer, whitetail, it doesn't matter. I'm looking somewhere every single night. And so I spend a lot of time looking over at my whitetail spots, just thinking, where could be my next spot? Where am I going to go find a new big buck? But yeah, when I'm scouting, I'll get on Google Earth or, Onyx and look at the aerial views. And when I'm looking for hardwood type stuff, I look for a lot of that. And then I'll look for some of these old like clear cuts where there might be a lot of feed and vegetation and stuff that might be next to some big timber or a really thick hardwood type bottom where those deer are going to go in and lay down in bed and kind of hang out where they're safe. Nothing, and especially in some of the spots where we're at, nothing is going to get to those deer without them hearing you coming from 3 miles off type of thing. I mean, it's nasty. So I look for that. And then I'll also look at like water sources. It's like swamps. I like looking for swamps in timber. So I'm like, okay, I know they can get water in there. I know it's thick. There's feed around because the water. And so, but what I look for will be like some of these ridges coming down, and then there might be a swamp or something at the bottom of them. And it creates a pinch point. So those deer have to travel around them or next to them type of a thing. But I know like those are going to be good spots if there's deer there. And generally most of the ones that I find, I mean, there's deer around them, like every single one of them, because they're getting water. And so in some of those places in Eastern Washington, the water in like these little streams and creeks and stuff that you might see on Onyx dry up midsummer because the snow's melted and it's runoff is all it is. And they're not actual flowing creeks. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of is an issue. But then once you figure out these swamps that they always have water, put 2 and 2 together, that took a while to learn. But once I kind of figured that one out years ago, then it was like, oh, no wonder there's deer here, and then things started clicking and you were always seeing rubs there. And then that's kind of where it led me into certain things. But I feel like it's almost one of those things that over the years, you just pick up on little things. And I've learned so much that I don't realize that I've learned.
Yeah.
That you go back and you're like, oh, this is why I'm successful in figuring things out, because I've figured all these little things out over
that you don't even think about anymore. And and it's funny because I've always heard like you learn something more when you teach it. And what I learned is like when I started talking about e-scouting and stuff I started realizing things that I was doing that I wasn't really thinking about, or I wasn't, right. I didn't have terms for them, right? I just, okay, that, areas that have, like you're saying with these swamps in it, like, okay, if I can replicate that in other areas, or where these fingers run out and things, and you just do it without even thinking a whole lot about it.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things. It's like, I'm just always looking at a map and like looking for those spots that I take it for granted. And I don't really even think about it until you just brought that up, because it's just stuff that I do. And so now I'm like, oh, maybe that's why. So maybe just kind of open my eyes here a little bit, but so I think, but yeah, terrain wise, I definitely look for like the vegetation in those ridges and then the water sources. And, those are kind of like my big 3 things that I'm like trying to figure out: vegetation, where they can feed, where they get water, and then, where they're going to hide type of thing. And then travel kind of comes into that once I'm like, how am I going to hunt it or whatnot? But
as far as like natural food, is that mostly browse as far as that, and grasses that might come up in some of them swamps and things like that? Yeah.
So this is where we run into kind of a major disadvantage hunting mountains, natural, food sources, public land, is I don't have the luxury of, hey, my deer are eating alfalfa all year and getting giant horns. You know what I mean? And so, or like in a cornfield or whatever, I don't have that luxury to say, yeah, I'm going to shoot a 200-inch deer this year because he's got the best nutrition that you could get all the deer that I'm shooting and we're hunting. I mean, those deer literally are eating just natural grasses, browse, plants and stuff that grow in the mountain each year. So if we have a dry year and then they don't get as much nutrients in the ground, obviously I'm not going to have as big, of a growth year. And then if we get a really good year, then I might, and it's weird in my area, if we get a year that has a lot of nutrients in the ground, all of a sudden my bucks will start showing up and they're like kickers or split eye guards or like weird stuff going on. And then the next year I'll have that same deer and he's like lost a kicker. He's lost 2-3 kickers or a split eye guards. Like it's weird. And so it like, you can kind of tell year to year, like, hey, he had a good year and nutrients were good. And then in the grass and stuff, but this year kind of sucked, And so I've got one buck that I have 6 years of pictures of right now that we've been watching forever. And it's funny over the years. I mean, he's growing all sorts of different little things like based on, nutrients and stuff in the ground. But for the most part, he stayed exactly the same. So it's just kind of weird.
We've noticed that with weather affecting them. One, if we have a bad winter or say we have like ice late that they can't dig at the ground and get any feed that way and they're only relying on browse that's there. Then once it starts to get into the summer and everything, all their nutrients go into their body rather than their antlers. But if you have a mild winter and it seems like a lot of rain early in the summertime, that's when you see the biggest antler growth. And
sure.
Like this year was a terrible year actually for antler growth for all the deer that I was hunting. Besides the one I shot, none of them got any bigger. Some of them actually got smaller racks from them. Like I know it's the same deer, but he didn't. They like exactly what you said.
Yep. And I don't know about you, but I mean, it's like a lot of guys in the Midwest that, they start talking. I see all these posts on social media and everywhere. And, I got this 180, 90-inch deer on my camera and this and that, or a 200 on my camera. And I'm like, it's cool. And it's like depressing before you even go out in the woods because I'm like, I know that my area, it's where I'm hunting. I mean, dude, if I see a buck that's 160, I'm like, dude, we're doing it. I'm like, I got, that's a big deer and I'm killing that deer. But then I think about it and I'm like, dude, 160-inch buck on public land with a bow, especially in Washington that's a big deer. Like, I don't care 160 anywhere. It's like, it's big.
Yeah. It's a big deer anywhere.
Yeah. And so, but it's that's like where my deer kind of top out at, but then I have a few bucks that like the one this year, I mean, I say 170, he might be a little bigger, but like he's a big buck. And so when you start thinking about my buddy's dad shooting one at 226, and then I know of another buck that was killed right next to me that was 204. And so there's a lot of big bucks that are there that get killed on public land, but it's like, they're just freak deer. But then I'm like, man, what would that deer have been if he was eating like out of a field in Iowa?
Yeah.
Like what would that 200-inch deer be,
And they probably get, I mean, in your area, they probably get age on them is what helps with the antlers. Like would be in our area. Like you don't see a 3-year-old that's 150-inch deer, at least not here.
No. Yeah. Not in my area either. I mean, most of my deer to get even 140, 50. I mean, it's like they're 5.5-ish, like, I mean, they're getting to that big mature phase. But then the problem is, as you know, hunting those bucks in the mountains and trying to kill one, especially once they get 4.5, 5.5, you're just throwing more wrenches in the whole works trying to kill one because they get smart, they get cagey, like it just goes downhill. And so it's like, cool. Yeah. I got this giant buck on my camera that he's old enough to shoot, but then it's like seeing him is another story. So that's where things kind of go down the rabbit hole of now I really got to work at this and try to figure out what he's doing to kill that deer because it gets way harder. So I actually sent the tooth in on this buck this year to get it aged. I'm curious to see how old that deer is, but I think he's probably 7.5, 8.5 years old.
That's awesome. He had that look to him. Like when I saw the photo, I'm like, you could just tell he's just an old deer. And did you send it in the deer age?
No, there's a place here in Montana called Matson's Labs down out of Bozeman there.
Okay.
And they age teeth for a lot of the taxidermists and stuff around the area here.
Okay.
So I went to the taxidermist and he had that pamphlet and I was like, oh, what's this? And grabbed it. I was like, I got to know, so I paid like $75 to send the tooth in, but dude, it's just like a peace of mind. It's like, I needed to know.
Yeah.
I need to know how old that deer was. So
I'm hooked on it. Last year was the first year I've actually ever sent a tooth in to, I've had taxidermists look at it and give an estimated age, which they can usually get pretty close to it. But then when you get they send you in like a certificate and telling you what it is, I'm like, this is awesome. Like it's so cool. And I actually have my jaw still saved in my freezer from my one this year. I haven't sent in the teeth yet, but I need to, because I just like getting it back. And last year mine was 8.5 years old. And it's just, I love seeing that. And it was, and actually the taxidermist had aged him at 9 or 10. He was thinking just because of the teeth were just so worn down. But those old bucks like that, it's just, that gets me worked up.
Me too. And it's cool because, when you think about, especially out here, it's like all the predators that deer had to evade its entire life. It's like we're hunting around an area. There's a ton of cats. There's ton of bears, there's wolves. It's like we have so many, and then hunters. There's so many variables that go into that deer even living that, most of my deer probably don't even make it past 3 years old, 4 years old, 4.5, whatever, because they get eaten. Mm-hmm. So, it's like to get one that made it and then finally get big enough, then it's like, now we're talking, because it's like, there's a lot that went into that deer getting to that point in its life. So
that's why they're so cagey. That's what, when I first started talking to Troy and he was talking about all those predators, I'm like, man, I thought, we have coyotes and bears and that's really it as far as a threat. And they're not really threats to those old deer. Mostly it's just the hunting pressure here that gets them. But having at all times, like not even at night, they're safe, out where you're at because of all the predators.
Exactly. And that's what's tough. We had wolves on 2 different cameras this year. Kylie and I were sitting in a blind and had wolves start howling behind us one day. Dude, there's so much going on here. And then we had a monster cougar on one of our cameras. It's a tough life for those deer out here that, if they make it, it's like, yep, this is special, and then to see them year after year. I got 2 bucks right now that I'm just dying to see again. One of them I've had on camera for 3 years in a row and he blew up this year. And of course, then I got hooked on this other deer and I should have been chasing this other one, but it is what it is. But I'm like, please just make it one more year, just like, make it till next year so I can get you, that's all I want. So I don't know, but who knows? There's a lot of variables. He might not make it through the winter. So
yeah. And how is the deer density in those areas that you hunt?
Super low. Like that's the thing. I'll be honest, most of the spots, if I put out a camera and just leave it, I might get 3-4 does max and maybe the same amount of bucks. Like I used to get a lot more, but even over the last 5 years, it's like cut in half. I used to have 7-8 does, and then I'd have 4 or 5 little basket rack type bucks, and then 2 or 3 in that 2.5 to 4.5 range. And then I get 1 or 2 that were big, mature, 5.5-year-old plus deer. Mm-hmm. Now it's so for example, the buck that I was hunting this year, I literally was like, I'm killing that deer. And he was the only buck hanging out. And there was a few does there. And that was it. It was like, I was hunting one deer and it was a ghost. And I was like, I'm killing that deer or I'm not killing one. And I was going to hunt him in 2 weeks if I had to. And so, but some of my other stands, this year it was 3-4 does and then 2-3-4 bucks, and they're not all big, just dinks and then one decent one usually at each spot.
Yeah. And then every once in a while you find a giant, they're not around every tree by any means.
No. And that's the thing. People think they're you start killing big deer and people are like, oh, he's hunting an area, there must be 50 big bucks there, type of thing. No, it's dude, I literally 8 different spots that I had set up. And then it whittles down to like 3 or 4. And then it's like, okay, there's a big one at each one of those. But then one of those, he's just gone, or a ghost, like he only shows up at night. And then you might actually be able to hunt 1 or 2 of them. And then that's it. And there's not big deer everywhere. So it's like when you see 170-inch deer, you're like, okay, I need to focus and figure this out, and that's when I don't know, I joke around with my dad and Kylie, but I'm like, that's when I go into kill mode. Cause then I'm like, okay, I need to figure out how to kill this thing. And then they know not to bug me. Cause I just literally start thinking different, Yeah. And I'm like moving stands, moving this or that, trying to figure out where that deer's at. And then we're going to kill him. So
you need to give a saddle a try.
Dude, I know I've had several guys talk about that. And actually, so one of my buddies that hunts over there, he bought one this year. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to me about, because he parks his truck and he hikes down through this, like kind of we'll say a small river. It's, big creek, small river type status. I think it's actually labeled a creek on the map, but it's kind of a small river, literally like wades that thing and then climbs up this mountain 3/4 of a mile up the other side and gets on this bench. And he was packing his tree stand and ladders and all of his crap over there. And then this year he went and bought one of those saddles and he's like, dude, that was a game changer. And so I was, and then he actually kind of got my wheels turning on it, because it opened up hunting some spots, and there's spots that I would hunt hands down if I had a way to get in there. But it's, I can get in there, but when you're layered up and, 4 or 5 layers of clothes, just trying to stay warm all day when it's that cold out, dude, by the time you hike in there in the morning and get all your, gear on, and then you go hike into your stand, you're sweating when you get in there. Mm-hmm. And especially if you have to climb in there a mile, then it's a mess. So then you're cold and you ruin the hunt. And so there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, there definitely is. But like, so my saddle setup, so I have a tethered saddle and there's sticks. The whole thing weighs 7 pounds. That's including the saddle. That's including the sticks. That's everything I need to get up in the tree. And I don't have any fixed stands out anymore. I used to do that, move them around and haul a climber into areas and all this stuff and hang-ons and with the big steel sticks. And I'm like, no, now I use that. And if I'm going to hunt, I might hunt the same tree, 4 days in a row, and I'll just leave my stuff there. But it's because then I can move without like being like, I have to tear this down, because after 5-6 days of sitting all day in there, your drive to want to get up and move something that's big and heavy is I don't know, it's tough on me at least.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very fun anymore.
No, it's not.
yeah, I know. I've been there. I've done it a lot. And I'm just like, okay, this needs to happen. And then now I'm just going to go hunt somewhere else because that's already set up and I don't want to mess with it, Mm-hmm. And so you kind of even like abandon deer. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go hunt a smaller buck because I don't want to mess with it, But yeah, I've been there, done that. The saddle thing might be something to check out here for sure. And I mean, heck, it could be a good deal here in Montana too. Like I know spots that I'd like to hunt elk and you can hunt over a wallow or something and take that thing in and, clear in the backcountry and get up above the wallow. I always get a bad time from all the guys, for hunting whitetails one, but then when I'm like, oh, I'm sitting in a wallow, I'm going to kill an elk off this thing. They're like, let's go call an elk in. And I love calling elk, but I don't know. I'm like, I'm an opportunist. I'm going to kill one wherever it seemed fit in the situation. So I'd sit in a wallow. I'm going to do it,
Yeah. And what's funny is, so I was working a booth for Tether the Saddle Company at Total Archery Challenge in Pennsylvania. And there's a bunch of Western guys there and they're over there looking at them. They're like, this is a game changer for hunting wallows and stuff like that. Like, I think if some of you guys get to using these things, like it would definitely be a changer for you. I saw there's one of the guys, Eric Chesser from Hushin had killed an elk out of a saddle this year and used one. They're just so light and I always see people in Utah a lot hunting wallows and stuff, and I feel like that would be perfect for it.
Yeah, you kind of have to in some of those areas. So yeah, I mean, dude, they would be. You talk about stands. I actually packed freaking tree stands in Utah clear up where I ran into your Was it your cousin?
Yeah, my cousin Mason. Yeah.
Yeah. I had tree stands clear up in there, and I packed 3 of them in there during the summer and had them clear up over the backside in the next canyon. And yeah, so I spent a lot of time in work. I was like, oh, I'm going to kill a mule deer up here. And like, I found some good spots and there was bucks there, but then I ended up shooting 1 hour and a half after daylight, just spot and stock, and wasted all my tree stands. But anyways, yeah. So, I mean, I've packed them a long ways.
Yeah. And that's some, from what Mason told me, he's like, that's straight up and straight down country in there too. He's like, it's rough.
Yep.
Yeah. So the backstory on that is my cousin Mason, who I've done all my hunts with, and has been in some of the films for anybody listening, the elk hunt and everything. And he ran into John and actually watched John arrow a mule deer. They were both stalking the same buck in Utah.
Yeah.
That's
kind of funny.
It is. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
He, I can't remember how he described it and how I figured out it was you, because he didn't have your name completely right. I think he said he called you John Barklow, and I was like, and he started describing you and something you guys said, and then I saw your buck on Instagram, and I was like, all right, now it makes sense. And then he's like, yeah, that's him.
Yeah, that's funny. I know. I ran into him at the truck there after packing my deer out, and then he killed one. I think it was the next day he killed his.
Yeah.
And then I ran into him, and it was funny because I seen his Pennsylvania plate at the trailhead, and I was just kind of like, how'd you end up clearing here at this spot, and didn't put 2 and 2 together. And I didn't even know he was your cousin until you brought it up.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because, small world, like traveling clear across the United States, and then just a small little circle, it's kind of funny, but
yeah, it is.
Yeah. That was good. So,
but anyways, back to the tree stand thing. So do you typically sit in the same spot like multiple days because of that low deer density?
Yeah. So I've had some people say, oh, you can't sit in the same spot day after day. And the way I look at it, I have so many things going against me already because I don't have a lot of deer. And the way that, the mountains are there, the wind's kind of swirling all the time. And so I figure that my scent, at least for me, and that's why I try to set my stands at like 25 feet off the ground, because once you get above like 22, the wind will actually change from what it's doing on the ground. Mm-hmm. So I feel like if I get that high, my scent's doing something different. So they don't really know that I'm maybe even in the area. But I don't know. I think it's almost a bad thing, but I get locked on like one deer, and I'm like, I want to kill that buck. And so I'll sit there every day until I kill that deer, like until he makes a mistake. And granted, I've already done a lot of educated guesses, I'll call them educated guesses, like looking at trail cameras and everything, and like kind of knowing like there's good odds that this deer is going to slip. And then I just sit there until I kill him. And so I've had some that it hasn't worked on, but a lot of them it has. And so I just sneak in and sneak out, but I'm really, on like scent control. And every night I try to shower and, use like dead downwind or some body wash or something to try to kill my scent. And then I spray all my stuff down, like backpack, bow, everything, every night, all my clothes, boots, and just really trying to eliminate my scent as much as I can. I don't know if that stuff works 100%. I don't know.
It's a mental thing, mental. Right?
It's mental. So but they say it works, and I'm assuming that they've had some scientists that say it works. So I hey, I buy it, I spend money on it, I might as well use it. And, but I don't know. I can't really say that it doesn't work per se, because if I sneak into a spot and sit there day after day after day after day, and then I finally, I kill that deer. And if you're going in, especially a big whitetail buck like that, big old deer, you got to be halfway scent free, because I feel like his patterns would change or something would change. It was just like the ground blind. I mean, I knew something was up. And so, or he did too. So yeah, I sit the same spot. This year I didn't. And I don't know. I killed that buck on the 3rd day. So the first day I hunted him, 2nd day I actually went to a different stand on that one buck that I'm hoping makes it till next year. And then I hunted him again the next day, trying to just not let him know that I was in the area. And so this year I did it only because I just was like, this is kind of all my eggs in one basket type of thing. And I didn't want to mess it up.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I hear that all the time from whitetail hunters, like about bouncing around. That's kind of like that, you can't hunt the same tree twice. And I bought it for a little while because I saw it so much and people saying it. I'm like, I got to move. And then I realized I was becoming less successful because I was bouncing around. And I'm like, hold on a second. This doesn't apply to what the Midwest does and stuff. When you have a lot of deer, I can understand. Like when you have, a dozen does that you might see in a night, yeah, you could probably screw it up from your scent. But for me, I'll sit 3 days and not see a single deer a lot of times. So it's like, I know that this deer uses this trail and hits his scrape sometimes. I need to be there when he does, come there. If I keep bouncing around, then all of a sudden I'll go check that camera and there he was. And I did that last year in 2020. I was hunting one specific deer and I literally stood at the tree where I was going to hunt again. I'm like, I had Justin, my camera guy, with me. I was like, no, I'm going to move down here. And I moved only like 80 yards. I'm going to cross this little creek and up the other side, and didn't see a deer all day. On the way out, I was like, I'm not even checking that camera, whatever. A month later, I came back in and he was there that day, and he was that close to me, but it was so thick with evergreens that I couldn't see him or hear him, and the creek was flowing through there. So it was just like one of those things, like you gotta trust your gut and wait it out sometimes when it's
exactly. A good spot. Yeah. I mean, I've been there, done it, and I don't know. I like sitting the same spot just because it's a mental thing for me. I'm like, the longer I sit here in this tree, something is going to happen. And if you, like you said, I look at it, you start bouncing around to other stands. What happens with that? You're not spending as much time hunting that specific deer. Your odds of missing another deer at another spot are pretty good. And so you're better off, in my opinion, especially if there's not a lot of deer in the area, to just hunt it, because you're not going to bump them as much generally. So that's, I'm kind of under that same strategy as far as I'm sitting there until I kill that deer. So some people, they can't sit in a stand that long and they hate it. So, It is for me, it is what it is. I'm like, I know that's what needs to happen. So it's a mental thing that I just block out and do it, rather than maybe just like, oh, this is fun, I'm just going to sit here every day. I enjoy it personally. I mean, I like sitting all day like that, but some people can't see the same scenery every day, and you know how it is.
Yeah. It for me, I've learned to do it because I wasn't good at it when I was younger. And I remember my dad would always tell me, like, you need to sit, like, in that midday movements can be really good. Like, you need to sit, especially during the rut. And I'm like, I'd climb down at like 11, and then I've had it where literally I'm halfway down the climbing sticks and here comes a buck, or or the cameras show me after I left, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore, and I just have to stick it out. It sounds like you focus most of your time during the rut when you're hunting the whitetails, right?
Mainly because I'm hunting other things throughout the year. It's like, okay. I'm hunting elk, I'm hunting bear, I'm hunting antelope, whatever. It's like mule deer, even. It's like I'm bouncing around all sorts of different hunts. So I just kind of know, like, hey, this is my time that I'm going to go hunt those whitetail. And then that's kind of what I block it out for. But
how does Washington, or actually, to finish your thought,
I was going to say, I don't know. I'm funny, because I was actually talking last night. We were eating dinner, and I was like, I wonder if I could go over there in September, first week of September, because season opens usually September 1st. I'm like, I wonder if I could go over there before the elk start really bugling this year and go kill that big buck in velvet. And so I don't know, my wheels are turning now. And honestly, I might give it a run this year just to do something different.
Oh, that would be, would you think you'd still focus on those scrapes?
Dude, I don't know. Point? Like, they'd be a new thing. Like, I'm not sure what I would do. And so my wheels are turning now, and I'm like, I need to start figuring out how I would kill one, but I almost want to do it just to challenge myself to see if I can kill one of those bucks. I mean, I know they're sometimes easier when they're in velvet before they shed or rub, but I don't know. So I might need to pick some people's brains and just kind of see what to look for. And, or, like, just, I don't know. I like picking people's brains anyways about anything. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do some picking. I think I might give it a run.
I would talk to
Yeah.
Troy. He's killed a couple in velvet or early in September like that, and I feel like he still hunts scrapes from the sounds of it, but maybe where they're located at might be a little bit different than your rut setups. But I've never hunted them that early. Our season doesn't open till October, and I always feel like though that they are more predictable. Like I'll get some of my biggest deer right when they last have velvet, and even like at the first week after they lose their velvet, and then they kind of disappear, and I have to try to relocate them again, when it comes to October. Sure. I mean, I killed my deer October 2nd this year, which was opening day, and I haven't killed a deer in October since 2014. Normally I'm a rut hunter because I don't have the time to focus. It's just weekends when I'm off of work, and we can't hunt Sundays in PA, so it's only Saturdays, and I just always focus my time during the rut because that's the best opportunity that I have. But I would love to hunt a state sometime early like that and really put a week's focus into trying to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of where I'm like this year, maybe I'll do it because I've been hunting mule deer in Utah the last few years in August. And this year I'm kind of like, I don't know if we're going to go back to Utah, obviously moving now and maybe not getting a tag. So I'm just kind of like, maybe I'll shift gears and go try to kill my whitetail early. So mainly because like I said, everyone gives me a bad time about not hunting mule deer. So I'm like, maybe I need to go hunt mule deer in November this year and try to kill like a 200-inch buck or something. So I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I need to shift gears. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. And so is Washington, do they treat non-residents okay when it comes to whitetails, or how does that look for someone that would like to travel there?
Do you mean as far as getting a tag?
Yeah, getting a tag and everything.
Yeah, so you can go hunt over the counter, but I'll say it honestly is a super expensive kind of state to hunt. Well, I say that. I mean, some of these other states are expensive, but for a deer tag, it's like $434. So, I mean, yeah, it's not your most friendly state to go and hunt deer. If I were just going to go pick a state, I'd probably go somewhere else. It's way cheaper. But yeah, it's the only reason I'm going back is I was a resident there for obviously most of my life. So I got a bunch of elk points. So I buy the deer and the elk because I have 20 points for elk and 24 for moose, sheep, and goat there. So I'm just kind of like, I got to put in until I draw my elk tag and just keep going. So it's cheaper for me to buy the deer and the elk combo license than just to buy an elk tag and put in. So that's the reason I'm going back. But somebody can go there, $434, go buy a deer tag. They can buy it the day they show up, buy it at a gas station and go hunt. So, I mean, if you want, you can do it and anyone can go do it. You just got to pay attention to certain units that are open at the same time, with like rifle units and stuff. So, wearing orange and stuff like that. And just kind of pay attention to those things, but it's doable.
Yeah. Is there any areas that are draw for whitetail?
There's a few tags, but most of those are rifle tags and they're down in like Southeast Washington in like farm country. So,
okay. That makes sense. And have you hunted whitetails in Montana or Idaho or anything?
I've actually hunted whitetails in Northwest Montana a few times, and it's just big mountain country up there, just kind of like what I hunt in Washington, almost in places on steroids though, because some of the mountains in Montana are pretty big. So, but I've hunted them up in Northwest Montana a little bit, and that's actually a really fun hunt, and there's way more deer than what I'm hunting in Washington, and you can hunt them with a rifle all November. So it's like all rut, you're just out chasing them around with a gun. So now that I'm living here, I honestly might give that a go again, just to go and see if I can track down, something big up there in the mountains. But yeah, so I've hunted them in Montana, and then also a little bit when we've been hunting mule deer. Of course, you'll see them running all over the place, like farm fields and stuff like that, or river bottoms and stuff, especially central and eastern Montana. They're everywhere. So, killing a whitetail in Montana in November, especially if you had a gun in your hand, would not be, in my opinion, it's a 1-day hunt. You just go out, find one. You're probably honestly going to shoot like 140 or 50 inch buck and just like get her done and it's over, if you knew where to look, So yeah, I don't know. When I dropped my buck off at the taxidermist this year, here in Montana, when I was coming home, and this guy, and there was like 3 other guys with him, and they came in and they were with an outfitter and they were hunting somewhere, and they go in and he drops his buck on the floor next to mine. And it's like a mid 170s deer. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, we shot this one. Oh, we got a couple more. And he goes and starts pulling horns out of his truck and all these guys. And I'm like looking at all these deer and they're just like 140 50s. That one's like 170. And they're like, oh yeah, we just shot him up there. We're just hunting for like a day and a half. I'm like, what?
Oh,
so, it just, it was like no big deal to them to just go and shoot nice bucks that most guys never even kill 140-inch whitetail, And so It's like seeing that. And then they're talking about hunting like a day and a half. I'm like, I'm doing something wrong. So,
yeah. Well, I've said it before, and I'm going to do it in the next couple of years, is hunt either, Northwest Montana or Northern Idaho or something for whitetails. I have a buddy, Josh Boyd, that's in Northwest Montana, and he kills some giant whitetails up there and just talked to me about it. And Troy over in Idaho, and you hunt Washington, like that whole area just has like my attention. I just want to try it.
Dude, it's super fun. I know Josh really well. And
Oh, do you really? Okay.
Yeah. He's an awesome dude. And he actually knows one of my good buddies from Washington that moved over there to Libby up there in the Northwest corner. And he's a deputy up there, and Josh knows him really well. But yeah, it's kind of funny because Josh loves whitetails, and I actually started following Josh way back when he shot that big webbed whitetail. That was,
I know exactly.
It was on the cover of Eastman's, or I think it was on the cover of Eastman's. I can't remember, but it was in Eastman's way back. And I remember looking at that and I was like, oh, I need to figure that out. And that was kind of right when I started hunting whitetails, or like roughly within a couple of years. And I started seeing that. So then I reached out to Josh to like pick his brain, like way, way back to when. And so then we kind of just followed each other on social and stayed in touch, and then met at a few of the sportsman shows and ATA and stuff like that. And then I don't know, Josh and I kind of became buddies. But yeah, it's funny because now we're both living in Montana, and I'm like, I want to come up there and hunt deer with him just to go do it. But it's a very small group of people that truly love hunting, well, like whitetails when you're out in the West, and then those type of bucks, So I feel like Troy and Josh and myself, like, I don't know Troy as well as I know Josh. Like I know, just Troy from social and whatnot. But it's like Josh, I know. And so I'm like, I just want to hunt with one of them just to do it.
Oh, I know. And if you reach out to Troy and be like, "Hey, I'd love to pick your brain," he'll talk to you for 3 hours on the phone about it. Like he's ate up by it like you are, and I am. Like he just loves talking about whitetails, and I think that would be, it'd be cool to maybe one of these years we'll have to or maybe even sooner, plan a hunt out there and do that. I don't know. I think it'd be cool.
It'd be fun to like get all of us together and figure out some way to go do it and see what we could kill.
Oh yeah, that would be sweet. I'm planning on hunting Montana a lot this year if I can get tags. I should draw a pretty good unit for elk. I've been putting in for points for as long as I can get the general tag. That's the only thing I'm worried about, is getting that to just get the end, and then also get a deer tag. So my plan is, I'm actually thinking I'm going to go out in the spring and spring bear hunt with my brother, and then go back in September for elk, and then come back in November to hunt deer. So that's what my plan is.
That'll be good.
Yeah. So that'll be cool. So we kind of covered your 2021 buck. I mean, did you have many photos of him, like knowing that he was alive?
Yeah. So I actually, and that's the thing, obviously him being there last year, I had a ton of pictures of him last year. And then this year, he must've had some good nutrients somewhere, because he didn't really get bigger per se, like frame wise, but he got bigger split eye guards, and then he grew a kicker on the one side, and then a G4 actually on the one side that he didn't have the year before. It was kind of a bump, but I know he was old enough that he wasn't going to get bigger per se. So he just must've had the nutrients this year. But so this year I had, I don't know how many pictures of him, a lot. Like he was living there. And of course I knew from him being there last year where to find him. And so it was kind of like, I only had the camera out for maybe 3 days before he showed up on it. And then after that, then it was just like on. And I made a bunch of mock scrapes and this year, and Troy uses that Buck Fever synthetics. And I actually picked that up from Troy and used that this year and made a mock scrape right here. And that dude, he just started hitting it like every night. And he was hitting it like 2-3 times a night. He would come back, check it, and then there in the day and then back. And yeah, so, I mean, he was living there. I don't know how many pictures I have of him, probably 500 to 1,000, somewhere in there, I bet. Yeah.
Holy.
Like he was going to die. Like it was like one of those, like I have too many pictures, like this deer's dead. I just need the right day. And so, and then a big thing for me, and we didn't really touch on that, but is like the weather. And so I'll watch the weather. That's like my biggest thing is it can it'll be like sunny, kind of good weather, or maybe just overcast, it had rained or like light snow. But one day, all of a sudden it's like going to start either downpour rain or which those have been good, or it's going to snow or something's like changing. It's going to get really cold and get nasty weather, windy or something. And those are the days when I feel like I'm killing a buck. And so this year when I killed him that day, it had snowed a few days before, kind of started melting off. And that afternoon, all the snow was gone and it was supposed to start pouring down rain. And then it was going to snow that night. And so I say all the snow is gone. There was still a little bit of snow, but mostly gone. And then it started to pour down rain. And it was like 1:30 in the afternoon. I started feeling a few raindrops and I was like, great, I'm going to get soaked before 4:30 when it gets dark. And it started getting a little breezy and it just chilled off a little bit. And I literally text Kylie on my inReach and I was like, it's perfect. I was like, let's party. And then, dude, it was like, she messaged me back. She's like, it must be good. And I was like, the weather is perfect. I'm going to kill that deer this afternoon. And it was like 4:00. I heard grunts and here he came in right behind me and I killed him. And it was like raining, just starting. It was like kind of getting nasty. And here he walked right out. And I knew it was just like, I had that feeling. I was like, I'm going to kill that deer. And then the next week when I went back and got Kylie and she was hunting, we had one day and it started in the morning. It was supposed to get kind of nasty and snow during the day. And I told her, I was like, you're killing a deer. And we saw 5 bucks by 11 o'clock that morning. And we hadn't seen that stand had kind of been dead. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, there must've been a hot doe, 5 bucks. She shot one. Sad story. She lost it. We thought she spined it. And then it ended up getting up and walking away and she derailed her bow and it was bad. And, so anyways, we ended up losing this deer. And, but that day was the same thing. That weather just started churning and getting nasty. And we went and checked. We had 4 other stands still up. At each of those stands, there was a big mature buck in the daylight at all of them that day. Yep.
Real.
And it was the weirdest thing because I just knew. And I was like, just pick a deer you want to kill. We're seeing one, we're going to kill it. And we did. I mean, well, she should have. And so, yeah, weather's a big thing.
That's interesting. And you know, it's with weather, like those fronts that are coming in and stuff. Some people like to hunt the front of like before this gets bad. Some people like to hunt after summer. And so it's always interesting to hear how that works. And I like the bad weather like that myself too. I like it depends. Like with me, I feel like with heavy snow, when we get our first snow, it almost shocks them and they don't move until the next day. And the day after that heavy snow, it's like, it's on, you know, especially it's November or whatever. And then, and when is the rut, like the time you focus on?
I would say like the best time, like peak ruts around like the 20th through the 25th of November. Yeah. Okay. So kind of a little later in the month, but that like Thanksgiving week generally is like, that's when things are really clicking. So, but I've killed deer early too. Like, I don't know if you'd call it pre-rut or like around like the 13th, 14th, 15th, like that week prior. And like I killed a buck this year on the 13th. And so, you know, it's just they're starting to move. They're, and you can tell on the cameras, like, I just know, I'm like, hey, these deer are starting to get kind of ruddy. And I'm like, he's going to start showing in the daylight. And then I'll be watching my pictures and all of a sudden, boom, like there he is, And so then well, he's daylighted once, he's going to be back. It's just a matter of how many days, so.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. And so when you go there, do you stay in a cabin or something, or do you have tents up, or how is that?
No, we have like a cabin that we've just ended up staying at over the years. Like, you kind of just get to know people, and then, hey, and we end up just staying at this cabin for year after year after year. And so, just makes it nice. So, especially when it's nasty.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, it's one thing, like when I'm, and I go out west and usually I'm out there in September. So like, it's okay to backpack hunt or to camp, but when you're sitting in a tree all day, all you want is warmth after.
Exactly.
Like you're not moving. It's one thing if you're hiking all day and stuff, but like that's a whole nother world. Like that whole late season people that do that and then they camp out, that takes a different type.
Dude, you're dedicated. There was one dude, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, set up a wall tent. We drive by him every night, and we'd come out, of course, some of our spots, like we're literally driving like an hour back in the woods off the highway. And especially if there's snow on the ground and stuff, I mean, we're a long ways off the beaten path, but every night. So when we come out, it's dark, but there was this dude, he'd have his fire just ripping in that wall tent every night when we come by. So first off, I'm always thinking he had to be back here early and not sitting in the best part of the day, because he would not be back in the tent with it ripping like that. And, and I'm like, he's probably dying sitting in his tree stand all day. And then, and then he's trying to warm up at night. But and then we've had a few storms roll in there, and I mean, the wind is horrible. And that's the thing about that area. A lot of Eastern Washington, they're called tamarack trees. And they're like evergreen, fir, hemlock looking type tree, but the pine needles turn yellow in the fall, and those trees are really weak and they'll fall over. I mean, you don't have to have wind. Like they're just all of a sudden a 60-foot tree comes crashing to the ground type of thing. And you got to be really careful of those, especially if you get any sort of wind and there's snow. And I mean, you better bring a chainsaw, and you're cutting trees out of the road pretty much every day. And so like my dad and sister got stuck in there one year, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, and they had to cut 13 trees to get out in the evening, out of the road.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like, you're just there's a lot more that goes into it. I mean, it's like, just instead of climbing in a tree, I mean, you're going in the morning. Okay, you got the chain, because we're probably gonna have to pull a tree out of the road. Like you just know if the weather starts getting kind of bad. So it's kind of it's a sticky situation at times. But I worried about that dude in the wall tent though, because where he was camped that year, there was trees that they always fall in that stretch. And I was like, oh, we're gonna drive in one morning, this poor guy, I'm like, we're gonna be rescuing him, type of thing. So that was a little scary, but
interesting. And So the one thing I forgot to ask you at the beginning was to give some people a background. I'm shifting gears hard here, so just follow me. But what you do for a living, and because you are, a lot of people probably recognize your work, but may not be as familiar with who you are from that standpoint.
Yeah. So I own a company called Apex Advertising, and I do a ton of design work in the hunting and fishing industries and all over the place, but primarily hunting industry more than fishing. So I design logos and apparel, packaging, vehicle wraps, websites, do a lot of marketing too on social and stuff. So I mean, work with a lot of big companies, out there. Phelps Game Calls is probably my kind of biggest one that I work for, Dirk and Jason on a consistent basis, and we all hunt together and stuff too. And then also I'm a co-owner at the Elk Collective. And then that is an online education course that basically teaches people how to hunt elk. And so, it's kind of got a lot of feathers.
Yeah. And you've done like most of the design, or maybe all of it, for Kifaru and a whole bunch of others.
Kifaru,
too, right?
I did a lot. I actually built their catalog for a few years. I mean, that thing was like 48 pages long, and I built that front to back. And then, Cody Rich, his Backcountry Fuel Box and his podcast and stuff, done a lot of stuff for him. I've done stuff, you name it. I mean, there's so many. Cameron Haynes, I actually was the one that designed Cam's Keep Hammering logo when he came up with that and that started. And then I built his website and everything and built some of his t-shirts. And so, yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff throughout the industry over the years and been fortunate enough to work with a lot of the big companies and whatnot. And it's been a great time. So, yeah. So that allows me to go hunt a lot, owning the business, but I also work a ton. So, I mean, it's like we're hunting and I'll come in the evening, even when we're whitetail hunting, and I'm on my computer working. So anyone that knows me knows that I work a ton, and it is what it is. I mean, like this time of year, I always joke when hunting season's over, I work 7 days a week until September. And I'll say like, there's probably not many days that I actually don't work 7 days a week in the off season. So yeah, I love work and I love to hunt. So I'm just kind of like figure out a way to make it all work.
You're just living the best life.
I'm trying. I feel like a lot of times I burn the candle at both ends. And then, I mean, there's a lot of days I work 15 hours a day. So, I mean, it's like, you just pick and choose what's important to you, I guess, and try to fit everything else in between. So.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's cool to see like your work in all these different companies. When I was on your website, I was going through like, it says your clients or whatever. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that you did all of that work for, that amount of companies. It was pretty incredible. And then Cody was giving me some background on, you're building online courses and all this stuff. And I was like, man, John's a busy, talented man. He does a lot of
stuff. I've worked on a lot of stuff over the years, that's for sure. So yeah, and there's a lot of companies that I could put on my website that aren't even on there, and that's the crazy thing. So yeah, it's weird when you look at it. I don't realize how much work I've done until we'll walk into a Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's or something. I'm like, oh, I designed that packaging. Oh, I made that ad or that end cap or that shirt, or we'll be out like eating somewhere and I'm like, oh, there's a shirt that I made, and like it was kind of funny actually, like Born and Raised, when they had their Land of the Free series when it first started. So I made that logo, and then all of a sudden it started popping up people's trucks and shirts and stuff everywhere. And it was weird just walking into places and, they did a good job marketing it, and then, and it was just like, there's some artwork walking by, and it was just kind of funny to see that. But yeah, it's good. I can't complain. I enjoy it. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's funny. So when my background, when I was in high school, all I wanted to do was graphic design. Like that was the thing that I wanted to go to college for and all these different things. And I ended up basically somehow getting fed from the bottle that I needed to get a job in manufacturing and go that route. And cause it I don't know, not many people that I knew was doing graphic design. And I kind of look back wishing I would have, cause I enjoy that stuff. I was always into art and drawing stuff and designing things. And I enjoyed it. And I love seeing that when people are doing that and it's pretty cool.
I love it. And that's the thing. I mean, I was kind of the same way as you, like my mom, she and my dad both. It was like work, 9 to 5 at some corporate company type thing. And like, hey, this is what you need to do. And so, my mom would always like hammer me with, you need to go find a real job, like you can't own your own business, blah, blah, blah. And, and it was funny because I look back and I've had the business, like over 10 years now. And so it's weird. And I mean, there's good things like my mom was super strict when I was growing up, and I mean, like always forcing me, do your homework, do this, do that. And I learned a ton, but I always felt like I was going to go get some 9 to 5 job and, work at a bank or like do something. I don't know, like, I liked finance. I liked numbers and stuff. And, so I always felt like that's what I was going to do. And then the way I ended up doing what I was doing, that's a whole other story, but, it's weird how it spun into the path that I'm on now. And I look back and I'm like, man, I always thought I was going to go a different route, and it's weird how the world takes you a certain way sometimes, and I don't regret any of it. And I feel like if you can take something out of every situation and just like, what did I learn? What was good? What can I take on from that to the next thing? You're going to do pretty good. So it's like, just try to take all the little nuggets and put it under your hat and don't take anything for granted.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's inspiring to hear that that you don't hear too many people say, I love what I do. I work 15 hours a day and sometimes, and I work 7 days a week and I love it. Like, you don't hear that.
No, it's pretty rare these days. I'll say that. So yeah, Cody gives me a bad time and stuff, cause he's a workaholic too, and like, I think that's why we both hit it off and like do so good together and like working on stuff and like whatever, is because we're on the same page. It's like both of us just love working entrepreneur stuff, and you're fortunate to do what you love, and so I think it just makes it easier to kind of succeed and push forward. But yeah, I don't know, but I think it also is a personality thing a little bit too. It's like I love seeing things succeed and other people succeed, and it's like the effort that I put into, helping someone else see their dreams go forward. It's like, it's just cause it's who I am too. I mean, it's like, dude, if you knew me and like got a chance to hunt with me and stuff, it's when we leave the truck, I'm like, I'm not coming back here without a notch tag, especially if I'm hunting elk or something. It's like, if we're backpacking, it's like, nope, we're not coming back till this tag's filled, and it's just, I don't like failure. So it's like everything I do, I'm like 110% all the time, so I think that's why it's like work, hunting, everything, relationship. It's like, I just go 110, but that's me. So.
And then you sleep when you're dead.
That's my motto. I'm like, I'm just going to sleep when I'm dead. So, I mean, it is what it is. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. It's obvious, with your elk hunting success and your whitetails and everything else. Like, you don't do that by going half-assed or going in that way in business, all of that. And I think, for me, I feel like when I started elk hunting and I realized it was like, all right, I need to prepare kind of year round for this, whether it was fitness or scouting and with whitetails and stuff. That just, for me, hunting was what translated me for the rest of my life to doing that and getting into doing the stuff with the podcast and everything else on the side. I'm like, I can make a very comfortable living just doing my 9 to 5, but I really enjoy doing this other thing. And I just didn't, I don't know. It's just one of those things I just love, keep doing. I love hearing people that do that. And that's what, I'm actually in the process of doing Cody's course as soon as I finish his, the Rich Life Academy about, entrepreneurship and everything. Cause I love learning that. I love being around people that are like that. And it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I think I'll see you on there in a few too. He invited me on tonight. So.
Oh, did you? Oh, so we're going to, get off this.
Talk more.
Again.
So, So, he texted me earlier and was like, hey, you want to jump on this thing tonight? I'm like, I guess, let's do it. So,
That's cool. Cool. All right. Well, I guess with that being said, Jon, do you want to let everyone know where they can follow you and find your business and anything else?
So you can follow me. I use Instagram primarily at Jon Gabrio. It's JonGabrio. And then Facebook's the same. And then business wise, Apex Advertising LLC. And it's apexadvertising.co, just CO, no M on there. So that's my website for the business. And then obviously we've got the elkcollective.com too. So you can go from there and they can follow me, and just a lot of hunting pictures and stuff like that I love. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking to me about this. It was cool. I love it's a mixture of the Western stuff I love and the whitetails and the mountain bucks. It's just the whole package. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.